So it's official. It looks like Apple has finally unveiled a brand new iPad Pro. So it looks like all the rumors and speculations were actually correct when it comes to this upcoming iPad Pro. And honestly, I'm not really too surprised about that because most time when rumors and speculations actually come out, 99% of the time they are going to be spot on with today's technology. Things just get leaked out and everything like that. So let's go ahead and look at this brand new iPad Pro and let's actually see what Apple has actually changed or not changed with this upcoming iPad Pro. As of today, actually, as of the recording of this video, you can actually go over to Apple's official website and you can actually pre-order this for yourself. Unfortunately, it's not out to the public yet or not out on the market yet, so you will have to pre-order it, but it is available for pre-order right now, which is actually very nice on Apple's part. Now, going over to the actual website from Apple, you can see that the brand new iPad Pro that they are releasing for 2020 is pretty much going to look like the same iPad that they had back in 2018. They didn't do anything to the iPad. It looks exactly the same. And honestly, I have mixed feelings about this. On one hand, it's okay since this design in particular does look very beautiful and very nice, and it actually looks very modern. Sure, I really wish we would have got a different design because first of all, it's been a couple years now since they refreshed their iPad Pro, so it's about time that they would have did something a little bit more crazier. But I guess it's not really too surprising since Apple, uh, for a while now, hasn't really been changing their designs on a lot of their different products. Since Apple is just a different company, they don't always want to change their design. They want to keep the same design for many generations, and that's pretty much what we're dealing here when we talk about this brand new iPad Pro. It would have been nice to have things like no bezel on the actual front of the actual display, which so many modern day smartphones practically have no bezel, so you still will get a small bezel around the screen, but it's not that big a deal, and it does look uniformed and it does look very nice. So overall, you just got to take what you can get. But overall, I am happy with this design, but it definitely could have been better. And especially for people who are looking to upgrade their pre-existing iPad Pro from 2018, this is going to give them less incentive to actually go out and want to buy the brand new iPad Pro because really honestly not too much has really changed with this brand new iPad Pro. It's pretty much a small refresh from what we had back in 2018, which is actually unfortunate. The biggest thing that they actually changed with this iPad, if you scroll all the way down, is going to be the camera layout. You can see they're actually adding multiple cameras to the iPad for the very first time. I think you're going to have a whole bunch of different sensors. You can read about these sensors here. Basically, what it boils down to is the camera performance here is going to be absolutely crazy. The only thing about this is a lot of people, of course, really do have mixed feelings about using an iPad for a photography device. Do you take pictures with it? Do you not take pictures with it? Honestly, I'm a person who thinks it's kind of silly to actually take pictures with an iPad just because it's so big, but at the end of the day, it's not really a bad thing that they are putting all this camera technology into the iPad just because, well, it is going to be useful. There are times you may have your tablet on you and you may just need to take that picture, and it is nice. You will have amazing camera performance with the actual camera on the back. I think this whole setup is similar to the setup that they have on the iPhone 11s as of recent, so that's actually very nice that you are going to be getting killer performance. I know not everyone's excited about that. That's one change they did here, so it is a nice little improvement they are giving you if you do decide to update, especially coming from that iPad Pro from 2018. And then if you actually scroll all the way down, the last thing they pretty much changed with this, of course, is performance with every new iPad. No shocker, they are actually adding brand new performance. They're going to an A12Z Bionic chip, so of course, faster performance. Things will load faster. Things will be better on screen. Overall, you'll just get a better experience when it comes to iOS on your or iPad OS on your brand new iPad Pro. And I think outside of that, honestly, there's really nothing else they changed with it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this iPad, unfortunately, for the actual iPad itself. One thing they are changing, which is a pretty big, significant change for the iPad Pro or iPads in general, is they are going to be giving you a brand new smart keyboard here, and the rumors and speculations were also correct about this brand new smart keyboard. Basically, what this smart keyboard is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to have a trackpad for the very first time. Let me go ahead and scroll down to see if you can actually see a picture of this thing. And also, one thing to note about this smart keyboard from Apple is you can see it does have multiple angles right there. When I go in and out, you can see it is on like a hinge that leaves the iPad kind of like floating in the air, which is actually a kind of a different form factor for the iPad, or a different way you can actually use the iPad. And I actually think that's very interesting, just because now it's floating. It may actually give the user actually a better angle when they actually read the iPad or when they're typing, so maybe that's their justification for it. But yes, here it is. It looks like it has a trackpad on the actual smart keyboard. One thing I did notice about this whole keyboard as well, it looks like it has a different keyboard than the other one on the market. I'm not too sure about that, but it does seem more like a MacBook keyboard in my opinion. Overall, the quality of this thing just looks a little bit better. It is kind of interesting also to see the actual design of the actual trackpad here in this situation. Who would have thought that Apple would be willing to put a trackpad on a smart keyboard for the iPads? But yes, they in fact did. I'm not too sure if this works for every iPad that has pins on it. I'm assuming it would, because that's how the current smart keyboard actually works from Apple. It allows you to use it on pretty much any big iPad, which is actually very nice. So I'm assuming this will work on other iPads as well, not just the current iPad Pro. It'll work on last iPad Pro. It'll work on the iPad Airs. It'll work on the iPad 7th generation. So that's actually very nice. And then it looks like here also they are making pretty big improvements to iPad OS, where it'll actually work more fluid with a trackpad, of course, because obviously iPad OS or iOS in general was not ever designed around a trackpad. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they actually implement a trackpad into iPad OS, especially since it's not made for like a cursor on a screen. So it's just very interesting. And here's something else I actually really wanted to talk about. I really wanted to also talk about the direction that Apple is actually pushing the iPad. Now, obviously, that the rumors and speculations were real, of course, about the trackpad being on an iPad. This really does prove that Apple wants to make their iPads more closer to a laptop, regular desktop OS, by putting a trackpad on the iPad. And honestly, I'm not really too surprised. That's the direction that Apple wants to take their iPads. They just don't want to make them a mobile experience. They want to make them more close to a laptop experience by having this trackpad, by having all these other features. And you can see in this actual on the actual website for the brand new Pro, you can see that their marketing for this thing is, it's not just another computer or whatever. If I scroll up, I also wanted to see really quickly. Oh, it looks like they're still using this, maybe the same display that they had before. Also, with this iPad, I think there was also rumors floating around that they were going to use mini LED, but I don't think mini LED is here as far as I'm aware, at least looking at this website. If I am wrong, I do apologize for that, but I'm pretty sure they're not using mini LED. They're still using the same standard panel that they had for practically ever, and it's not a bad thing, because their displays are still top-notch displays, and they're still very crispy, and they're still very nice and elegant to look at. But going back to what I was talking about, I wanted to talk about the marketing campaign. You can see right here, it does say your next computer is not a computer, because they're really trying to make a big marketing campaign about how the iPad can be a more traditional computer than just a standard tablet, which the iPad has always been in the tablet game. It has a mobile OS and things like that. That really depends on what you're trying to do as a consumer and as a person buying a computer. What do you need to do and what tasks do you need to do? I would still argue that if you need to do a lot of hardcore tasks, the iPad is still not going to cut it, because the biggest flaw with the iPad in its current state is just the fact that it is, again, running a mobile OS. And with a mobile OS like iOS, you do have limitations in play. One of the biggest limitations in play is obviously going to be the fact that you don't have true keyboard and mouse support, compared to a laptop. And then on top of that, another big downside is going to be the fact that you're dealing with applications that are much more watered down compared to what you can get on like Windows or Mac OS and things like that, without a doubt. And of course, a lot of the stuff that you do from day to day, especially like for instance, if you want to do a lot of if you have a lot of like attachments like mass storage devices, they do work on iPad OS, but then there's also limitations with the software that it's just not a nice experience as like a desktop class OS. So you can see there is a lot of things in play to make it not as good as a replacement as like a laptop or a full-blown desktop if you need to get some real work done. Again, it will depend on what you need to do as a person, because there still is a lot of crazy stuff that the iPad can do in its current state now that they actually released iPad OS last year and things like that. It's still way better than it was like before iPad OS, and they're adding all these features. And of course, iPad is going to grow every time they release new updates to the iPad. And of course, one of the newest updates they are going to do, like I said, is going to be to the trackpad. They are going to be adding new features in iPad OS to really utilize that trackpad, so you have more control over a cursor in the actual OS, which is actually going to be very nice. So overall, would you actually upgrade your current iPad Pro from 2018 to this one? Honestly, I wouldn't actually recommend it, just because it's pretty much the same thing, just faster chipsets and then a better camera. You're not getting a new design, so it's not really worth your time unless yours is maybe beat up. If yours is maybe beat up, then you may want to go ahead and look at this and just upgrade. Or I can see people upgrading if you use your iPad all the time, and that's mainly your sole work machine. If that's mainly your work machine and you use this all the time, you may want to consider it, because obviously you'll get better performance, you'll get a better camera. Yours is aging a little bit if you use yours like every day for hours on end instead of trying to like replace the battery. If your screen's cracked or whatever, you may actually want to go and just upgrade your iPad Pro to this iPad Pro. Let's actually go ahead and go into an order and actually see what the price is. It looks like the price of this is actually the same price as it was back in 2018 for the iPad, the last iPad Pros. And then it looks like they haven't actually changed the actual screen sizes. It looks like we're dealing with the same screen sizes. That's really the one thing I'm always curious to see what they do with the screen sizes, because you never know with companies. They always like playing around with different screen sizes and things like that. But no, they're sticking to their guns this time. You can see we have an 11-inch and we have a 12.9-inch display. It looks like they're not going bigger and they're not going smaller than 11-inch. But if this is your main sole computer that you're going to be using for work related stuff, or this is your only computer, then yeah, you probably want a bigger screen like 11 inches and 12.9, especially now that they have these keyboards that are going to have trackpads on them. You're most likely going to be using them as like a laptop in a lot of situations, so you want a bigger screen, the better. And they look like everything else is the same. You're going to have up to 1 terabyte. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this. I also actually want to talk about the keyboard for this thing. If I go back here, it looks like on this article right here, the keyboard can cost up to $349. And I'm actually really blown away by that, because that is seriously very expensive. I know the quality may be there, but just for a keyboard and a trackpad, I think that's a little bit too expensive, taking in consideration that the iPad Pro is already expensive in the first place, and they're not going to be including this. They want you to go out and actually buy this. Is just not a good feeling. And on top of that, their marketing for this thing is still, oh, let's try to replace a laptop with this, and let's see what the iPad can do, and let's make it more closer to a normal computer. It's just not a good feeling that you have to buy the iPad, and then on top of that, you also have to buy the smart keyboard for it, which is just not great, just because, well, if you're trying to replace a computer, how can you be confident in trying to replace a normal computer if the one main key thing that makes it closer to a laptop replacement is going to be the keyboard and the trackpad, but that's sold separately for $349. Honestly, I just think that's a little bit too expensive, and somehow I really do wish Apple would actually somehow bring that price down, because that's not great. When you look at the iPad and when you look at the smart keyboard combined, it just gets way too expensive. And then of course you have to calculate sometimes tax in the mix. Overall, this is just very expensive, and you also have to realize that you can get regular computers in this price point. Sure, Apple keeps toting with this iPad alone, oh, look how much power this has. This has more power than a lot of PCs on the market, which is actually true. It does have some crazy amount of power in this iPad Pro, and it is a beast when it comes to performance. But the only problem is, again, you're also limited due to the fact that you're running a mobile OS. Again, it always boils down to that mobile OS experience, iPad OS, which is just a heavily changed version of iOS, which is on the iPhone, of course, and you can get stuff in this range that actually have better performance in GPU performance, or just overall has more ports and more things like that when it comes to a computer. Since it's in the same range as some pretty good laptops, honestly, you're gonna have a pretty big decision. Do you want to buy this thing, or do you want to buy a modern day laptop in that same price? Taking in, if you were to buy this thing plus the smart keyboard, it can get very expensive overall if you were to buy this thing and try to make it your everyday computer. Just overall, those are my thoughts on this brand new iPad Pro. Overall, I have very good things to say about this. I think it'll be a beast of an iPad. Overall, I'm still kind of disappointed that Apple wanted to make it exactly the same as the last iPad Pro. It makes a lot of people who already currently have it not a good, doesn't really give them a good reason to upgrade their iPad Pros to this year's iPad Pros. But we did need new iPad Pros because the old iPad Pros are aging now. They're already 2 years old, so it is nice we are getting practically better versions of the current iPad Pros. And like I said again, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a very good thing, since the current or the last iPad Pro from 2018 was a beast to begin with. So very interesting. It's also very interesting to see that they actually made this thing much more powerful, and we're still pretty much dealing with the same price. I thought maybe for some reason, since Apple is trying to move their iPads more closer to laptop replacements, you would think the price would go up, but I guess they can't really make the price go up if you think about it, just because, well, if they make the price go up, then what's the point of having like the MacBook line? They gotta have a reason for people to still buy the MacBook line. So even though they're trying to replace laptops in a sense, they also make laptops themselves. So they don't want to get into a situation where this thing can maybe replace their MacBook line altogether. But as far as this product goes, I don't think this product is honestly still going to replace a MacBook. If you've been looking at a MacBook and you do a lot of work and things like that, then most likely you're still going to want to pick up a MacBook over this. There's no reason why you would actually want to pick up this, because this still have a lot of limitations. It looks like, really quickly before I in the video as well, it looks like this smart keyboard from Apple is actually going to have some other features as well. It looks like this thing is going to have a USB-C port on the actual keyboard, it looks like, which is actually very interesting. Of course, it's going to have a trackpad. It's actually called a Magic Keyboard, I guess, not really a smart keyboard. That's the name they're actually naming this. And it is, yeah, like I said, very expensive for this thing. It looks like they're going to have multiple variants for this thing. $299 for the 11-inch model, and then $349 for the 12.9-inch model. So you can see right there, they are going to have multiple versions of this thing depending on what type of screen size you have. But I guess that does make sense, just because one keyboard can't fit both of them, because they probably want to stretch out the keyboard, just because the 12.9 one is much more bigger, so they want you to have a much more better experience and things like that. I'll have to wait and see if this keyboard is actually worth the money, because that is a lot of money. That's practically the same amount of money you can buy like a very cheap Chromebook and things like that. So that's very interesting. They're charging a very high premium for this Magic Keyboard, which is actually very interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for this video. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.